How the heck do you get a good bowed sound on double bass? If you've ever struggled with that, you're in the right place. What's going on? It's Jason Heath, and getting yourself set up to pull a beautiful sound on the double bass is one of the most challenging things about the instrument. It's something that people who maybe play violin, viola, cello don't think as much about, or if you mostly play pizzicato and then you have to pick this up from time to time, you might be surprised by just how tricky it is to get a good sound. So we're going to talk about gear, we're going to talk about technique. This has been covered extensively on this channel, though we've never done a video quite like this, so be sure to check the description for some resources to dig deeper on all these various subtopics. First of all, let's talk bow maintenance, and let's talk about rosin. You need double bass rosin to get a good sound, which leads me to the sponsor of today's video, Upton Bass. They make this wonderful new rosin. I have the maple version right here, which is kind of like Pops, a little bit darker, and they're making Maple Plus as well as Honey. I will cover some of those, and whatever climate you're in, that might have an impact on the type of rosin you want to use and the type of playing you do, but Upton's got you covered, as well as beautiful basses for whatever you're looking for. Great company, and thanks for sponsoring the video. Bass rosin will dry out much faster than you expect. I replace my bass rosin every 2 to 3 months, and I recommend that for amateurs, for students. The most common reason why people aren't getting a good sound, I find, though not the only reason, but the most common is not having fresh rosin. So have fresh rosin, put on about 3 swipes a day. Usually get going before you start, just to make sure that you don't need it. You don't want to put on too much, but I do find that not having quality rosin is the most common culprit for not getting good sound. Well, like folks say, you can't polish a turd, so it doesn't matter how fresh your rosin is if your bow hair stinks, and bow hair will wear out. I recommend replacing it at least once a year, maybe twice a year if you play a lot, or maybe even more if you're a tango bass player or something like that. But if you find that you put on fresh rosin, you're still not getting a good sound, having good bow hair and fresh bow hair is super important. There are all sorts of bow maintenance tips, and I've done videos about several of them. I really like using some sort of brush. There are these really cool bristle brushes that you can get from Whole Foods just for working the hair out of the bow, and just making sure that you don't touch the bow hair, that you loosen the bow after every time you play, and that you get the bow hair tension to a good spot. That will all help your tone. If it's too loose and you're scraping against the wood of the bow, that is not good. If you have it totally tight and it's almost parallel to your bow hair, that is probably too tight. So somewhere between too loose and too tight. I try to get it so that when I put some nice weight into the string, I can get the wood to touch the hair, but I have to kind of work at it. Gear, if your bow is working, you got good rosin, you got fresh hair, you've got it tightened to an amount that seems to work, then it could be your strings. Changing your strings once a year, once every 2 years, maybe twice a year, depending on the amount of playing you're doing, is key. I've done many videos about strings. If your strings are relatively new and you're still having trouble with sound, the other thing that might be causing problems is your bass setup. So going to a double bass specialty shop, and we have a whole resource, which I will link below, to help you find a shop near you. Just making sure that your sound post is adjusted well, that your fingerboard doesn't need any dressing, things like that that might not be quite so visually obvious as bad bow hair or bad strings. Maybe the bridge is in a really whack spot. You know, all those things can have an impact on pulling a good sound. Okay, if your bow is set up well and your bass is set up well, and you're still not pulling a reliable good sound out of your bass, you're not alone. That happens to everybody, and I have to spend some time every single day thinking about getting a good bass sound. I've done a video, I've done many videos about this topic. I did a video that has gotten some really good traction called How to Bow a Double Bass. So I will not regurgitate that. You can just check out the link here in the description below to that video. But making sure that a few things are working right will set you up for success in terms of pulling a sound. One is to get your bow hold set up in an ergonomic fashion, and there is a good way to do it for French bow, and there's a good way to do it for German bow, and there's more than one good way for both of those bows. But finding some way that keeps your hand in a fairly natural position is going to help. Then also making sure that your bow is absolutely perpendicular to the string at all times. That is going to be one of the biggest factors in getting a good sound. If your bow is crooked, getting a good sound is challenging. Make your bow perpendicular to the string. Use a mirror, record yourself on your phone, whatever you need to do, just make sure that you can set yourself up well. I focus on getting that string to activate. And I like to start on the D string because it's kind of one of those Goldilocks just right spots on the bass. The A and the E are a little thicker, a little more challenging to get going. The G string is a little easier, but you have to reach a little bit more, so D is a really good way to start. Also, one of the most common complaints that I hear from adult amateurs or beginners on the bass is the frustration they get when they hit two strings. So the D string, being bordered by the G and the A string, is a great way to get some training wheels on for like good sound production and making sure you're not hitting either string. So just starting with thinking quarter notes and quarter note rests down here. So I'm using about a third of the bow, and I am making sure that the down bows and the up bows sound the same. And I'm making sure that I'm getting the fundamental. My friend, the wonderful, incredibly useful exercises creator, Dennis Whitaker, talks about making the string go fat, and he has many wonderful exercises on this type of topic, which I will link up to here. We have his books available in our sheet music store. Just get a good sound on one note. Don't worry about getting a good sound all over the place. Just find one string, open string to start with, I recommend, and just get that to speak and sound good, and then build from there. So once you get the D string going, go to the G string, go to the D string, go to the A string, and just spend some time with separate notes, open strings. If you're finding that you're getting some misses, like not really grabbing the fundamental, adjust the weight you put into the bow, adjust the placement, or adjust the speed. And I have to spend time every single day kind of recalibrating myself and making sure that I'm getting the string to speak. So after open strings, which I start with every day, just having the same concept with scales. I'm only using the lower half of the bow. I find that if you master this, and we're never done mastering this, but at least making progress toward getting this sound. In the lower half, you can then apply it outward with the bow. I wouldn't worry early on about trying to use the entire bow because it's a little bit more challenging to apply these principles in the upper half of the bow. We do need to apply these principles in the upper half of the bow, but just taking some time and really getting it all dialed in the lower half of the bow, find that that is easier. It gives you the skill set that you can apply to other parts of the bow. So again, what we did before, open strings, and then doing the same thing on scales. What I love to do, and I do in my own practicing, is just repeat notes, like 4 times per note. Your brain time to think, that gives you some at-bats, some practices, and you're gonna whiff a note. You're not gonna have everyone be completely to your standard of perfection. I wasn't happy with all those notes I just played. If you're finding that you're getting like a inconsistent sound, break it down, reduce it, go back, check out your gear. Do you need more rosin? I have found that if you put on enough fresh rosin on a bow that is relatively new in terms of hair, I can give somebody even who's like day one on the bass the bow and they can get a good sound of the open D. So if you are having trouble getting an open D sound, it might be a gear issue. It could be rosin, it could be your bow. But if you just find that it's inconsistent, you get it and then you don't get it, that might be an issue with one of those foundational building blocks of tone: speed, weight, and placement. So let's start with placement. You don't want to be too far from the bridge or you'll get this wispy sound. You don't want it to be too close to the bridge, especially when you're a beginner, because it's tighter, the string has more resistance, it's more challenging to get the fundamental. As you get more advanced, you might find yourself getting closer and closer to the bridge, but for our purposes, we're looking for a place, it's kind of a Goldilocks zone between too far away and too close. So I like to start a little bit too far away and find that spot where you're getting some of the highs, the string is speaking, but you're not getting that edge from being right on top of the bridge. Using a mirror can be extremely helpful in terms of this, just for really getting objective about where you are. It will be pretty much between the bridge and the end of the fingerboard for most basses. I have this goofy extended fingerboard on my bass, so it looks like I'm always playing over the fingerboard, but my fingerboard should end here. So where I'm bowing right here, basically between the edge of what would be my fingerboard and the bridge. The next variable to look at is speed, and in my experience, most bassists try to bow their bass a little too fast. These thick strings require a slower bow speed, being a little bit slower with the bow, and a little bit heavier. So that third variable, weight, a little slower and a little heavier is going to be likely to produce better results. Now, you can put too much weight in, but it's rare, and I find that in general people are putting not enough weight in when they're starting out. And if you want to learn more about that variable, my friend Andy Moritz, the author of the amazing book Scale Skills, also available in our sheet music store, he did a video on the 10-pound sound. I will link to that. Super great concept, and hopefully this was helpful, just a way to introduce these variables. Like I said earlier, I've done a bunch of videos on these topics. They're all linked up to in the description as well as right here, and we'll see you in the next one.